Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is David Daoud, Senior Fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. David, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Brittany. It's always a pleasure.
I want to talk about where Israel is in its conflict with Hezbollah. Hezbollah launched a drone attack against Israel over the weekend, killing 4 and injuring dozens. This was Hezbollah's deadliest attack against Israel since the war began last October 7th. So what do we need to know about this attack?
Well, it's not the deadliest attack against Israel since October 7th. Let's remember that on July 27th of 2024, Hezbollah launched a rocket that landed in Majd al-Shams, a community in the Golan Heights, and killed 12 children. So it is one of the deadliest attacks, that's for sure. Look, this is par for the course, unfortunately. Not every defensive measure, not every defensive array, even as sophisticated as Iron Dome, is going to be a hermetic seal. Soldiers will die in battle, but what we're seeing now is that the Israelis have Hezbollah on their back foot and continuing to press. Just today, there were several Radwan Force operatives. This is Hezbollah's elite commando force that were arrested and brought back to Israel. There are other Hezbollah fighters that have been brought in for interrogation. The Israelis are degrading Hezbollah and its capabilities and its leadership. They have been in a very escalated manner for the past few weeks. And we have not, thankfully, we have not seen the kind of the doomsday scenario of Hezbollah unleashing its entire arsenal, perhaps because it's destroyed, perhaps because they're keeping a lot of it, in reserve, depending on how long this battle will go. But this gives Israel the upper hand. And of course, in any war, as successful as it's going to be, there are going to be tragic losses, including the attack you mentioned on the Golani base over the weekend.
Does this show that Hezbollah isn't decapitated? Because I've talked with a few of your colleagues from the FDD, and they said Hezbollah is the varsity compared to Hamas, which is the junior varsity threat. And within the past few weeks of fighting, Israel has decapitated Hezbollah. Does this show that it isn't so? What does that look like?
Well, I think it's an interesting question of decapitation, right? Let's start with that and kind of discuss what the Israelis have done so far. The problem there's decapitation, eliminating a specific leader in any terrorist organization. There's been a lot of debate in this in the counterterrorism field for years. Is it effective? Do you immediately replace someone with even someone who's more, perhaps more effective than their predecessor, and so on and so forth? We saw this with Abbas al-Musawi, who's assassinated in 1992. He was replaced by Hassan Nasrallah as Secretary General of Hezbollah. The thing with what the Israelis have done is kind of almost game the system here. They're not only decapitating the head, they're going several layers deep. So you're not only killing the Secretary General, you're killing his successor and that person's successor. So then the person in line to assume control of the organization is not someone who has maybe secondary but direct competence to succeed their predecessor. It's someone who's, if we're going to use the term, it's junior varsity compared to Hassan Nasrallah. And they've done this on several layers, not just the Secretary General, but with military commanders. What the Israelis have done, though, over the past few weeks, particularly since the September 16th or 17th, if I'm recalling correctly, the telecommunications attacks, it's like going into a ring with a very powerful boxer, someone who has all these muscles, and it's targeting their joints to break the joints, right? Break their elbows, you're breaking their knees. So the organization remains strong, but it can't function anymore because you've hit it in those critical junctures. And that's what the Israelis have been doing. And they've been hitting at such a speed and such a pace that Hezbollah has yet to recover or be able to stabilize. Now, if the Israeli tempo slows down, then Hezbollah will be able to internalize these attacks and be able to continue fighting. Now, one thing we need to talk about is this doesn't mean that Hezbollah is down for the count. Even with the degradation, Hezbollah is still capable of fighting, especially in the villages in the south, as very capable compartmentalized cells. Now, this includes some of the rocket and drone attacks. Just because you've hit the top doesn't mean that these people who remain are not still capable within that, that contained cell that they're operating in from doing a lot of damage, from having that expertise to do a lot of damage. And the degradation of that ability will take more time.
That's a really interesting analogy you laid out, that it's hitting a boxer at all of its joints, but the boxer is not dead. They're not, as you said, down for the count. They're still in this fight. But what is Israel's major goal here? Can it weed out Hezbollah forever? What does that look like?
Well, I think the goal that the Israelis have set is to return the residents of the north, the displaced 60 to 80,000 residents of the north, if not more, um, uh, to their homes in security. And I think that question there, it's not just returning them to their homes to a pre-October 8th, when Hezbollah's attack started, pre-October 8th style deceptive quiet, but to actually return them to where they no longer have to see Hezbollah operatives on the border. They no longer have to be threatened by their presence. They no longer have to worry about the sounds of digging, of potential tunnels under their homes, and so on and so forth. And what they really don't have to worry about is a potential October 7th style attack coming from the north, right? Which is what Hezbollah designed this attack. This is what they call the liberation of the Galilee. So to accomplish that goal, the Israelis have been ratcheting up pressure. Right? This is a strategy that IDF Chief of Staff Herzi Halevi outlined in January, that Israel would continue ratcheting up the pressure gradually until Hezbollah said effectively uncle, right, and quit. This is what we're seeing now. So with the mutual attrition that existed until September 16th, Hezbollah refused to back down from continuing to attack Israel for Gaza. And since then, right, the Israelis have ratcheted up pressure gradually. The telecommunications attack, killing Radwan Force commanders, a 1,600 target aerial blitz the Israelis launched, they still didn't back down. Then they went after the senior leadership, right? Nasrallah, his successor, and Hezbollah has yet, I mean, as of October 11th of 2024, they issued a statement saying, we are not decoupling Lebanon from Gaza. This remains their stance. So the Israelis are going to have to continue ratcheting up the pressure until Hezbollah, the price is just no longer worth it for Hezbollah. What that looks like remains to be seen. This may take a ground invasion of some sort by the Israelis, reaching at least to the Litani River, where they can degrade and destroy Hezbollah's assets. And if there is a credible force within Lebanon, or a credible international force willing to take over, then the Israelis can withdraw and let that credible force prevent Hezbollah's resurgence in the area. Unfortunately, as things stand, there is no credible force, and no one should be betting on either UNIFIL or the Lebanese government or any component of Lebanon to take up that job.
I want to talk about what you think the future here looks like, because you said there's not going to be that decoupling as of now unless Israel ratchets up that pressure. So are you saying that as long as Israel is still in a fight, is still engaged with Hamas, it will still in turn be engaged with Hezbollah?
I think so. And I think the Israelis have also decoupled this matter for themselves. They said, irrespective of what happens, this is months old, well, irrespective of what happens with Hamas, we're going to fight Hezbollah because this is a separate threat, right? This is not something that the Israelis, I mean, people can ask, well, why not just accept a ceasefire? Because a ceasefire now would allow Hezbollah to return to the border and to claim a momentous victory. Right? In May of 2000, they could say, well, we pushed the Israelis out of South Lebanon. In 2024, they can say, we pushed the Israelis out of Israel. So all this pain, they can turn to their base and say, all this pain that you suffered, well, we got the liberation of Palestine from the river to the sea, and Nasrallah's, the late Nasrallah's favorite turn of phrase, one step closer. So stick with us. Right? So the Israelis can't exactly allow that. And it's not just a rhetorical defeat for Israel. It's not just a psychological defeat. Again, Hezbollah will return to the border and continue planning to carry out October 7th style attacks in the future. So that's not an acceptable situation. There needs to be something that pushes them far away from the border, that maintains their distancing from the border. And unfortunately, we don't see that now. And again, this has nothing to do with Hamas. The Israelis can defeat Hamas. Hamas can be out entirely, and the threat from Hezbollah will remain. And unless there is a credible actor in South Lebanon, or in Lebanon, period, that can restrain Hezbollah, then unfortunately, continued Israeli military action appears to be the only deterrent for a Hezbollah resurgence in the area.
I want to move on to the Biden administration and recent comments and things from them. They reportedly told Israel that they will put their military aid at risk if they don't improve humanitarian conditions in Gaza in 30 days. What do you think? What are your thoughts on this response to an Israeli airstrike on in Gaza earlier this week?
Well, this has been kind of the conversation between the Biden administration and the Israelis since the outset of the conflict in Gaza. And I don't know if it's necessarily taking into consideration the military constraints under which the Israelis are operating. Right? Hamas may be essentially, as an organization, as a military organization, effectively defeated, but its fighters are still, they're still operating, and they're operating from within civilian areas. That does not mean they're not targetable. The fighters. You cannot target civilians, but you can target fighters who happen to be in civilian areas, subject to the conditions of proportionality. Now, this might be, excessive as far as the Biden administration is concerned, but the decision that international law leaves the decision to the battlefield commander in that time with the information they have at that time. So I think the Biden administration needs to take into consideration more the constraints under which Israel is operating, where you have an enemy like Hamas that is intentionally embedding itself among civilians to complicate Israeli targeting, and to, if the Israelis decide to target anyway, to win a psychological victory, or a narrative victory, if you will, by turning world opinion against Israel. At the same time, the Israelis, and they have, need to adhere to the laws of armed conflict in every one of their targeting decisions. Perhaps there's more tightening to be done there, and that's something that should happen through dialogue between two allies like the United States and Israel.
I want to talk about what's next. I know we have been talking about that, but there have been concerns about a wider regional war, escalation. Mm-hmm. What do you think is next here in terms of this conflict in the Middle East?
I don't think we're heading towards a regional conflagration. This is something that the Iranians and the resistance axis had been kind of dangling in a way to restrain, the objective here from the outset was to get Israel to accept a premature ceasefire in Gaza, so that Hamas could survive, rebuild, and rejoin this ring of fire that Iran has been building around Israel. So the deterrent, right? You realize you can't stop the Israelis, so you want to terrify the backers of the Israelis, the West, their allies, the United States. Well, if this continues, if you think this is a localized conflict, no, this is a regional conflict in the making that could drag the entire world in. So stop Israel now. Again, so Hamas can survive. But as we've seen, even the expansion of this conflict into Lebanon has not precipitated this dreaded regional conflict. Iran, yes, fired 181 ballistic missiles into Israel, and that's a violation of Israel's sovereignty. But it was not the opening shot in a regional conflict, and Iran made that very clear. They made very clear that this was in retaliation for the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh, Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah, and I'm forgetting the name of the IRGC official who was with Nasrallah at the time of his assassination, and we're done. They made it very clear this is not the opening shot. So this is a revenge. This is a retaliation. We are done. If Israel attacks us, then we will attack back. Again, it's back to that. This will turn into a regional conflagration. But I don't think we're on the precipice of that. I think what Iran wants, and what the resistance axis are betting on, is trying to get a premature ceasefire so they can cut their losses and lick their wounds and continue to rebuild. And one of the tools they keep using is that the continuation of this conflict will lead to a regional war, but they don't want it. They clearly, because a regional conflict will drag in the United States, and Iran cannot confront the United States.
There have been talks, as you know, about a potential ceasefire and negotiations really ongoing for the past year. You're using the word premature, so are we anywhere close to that now? Because it doesn't seem so.
Well, it's not the question of whether a ceasefire is imminent or not is different from whether a ceasefire is desirable at this point or not. I would say it's not desirable, because what will happen now, and this is what Lebanese officials, be it Nabih Berri or Walid Jumblat, or all these people that have ostensibly decoupled Lebanon from Gaza, right? They've backtracked the Lebanese government's position of supporting Hezbollah's position up until a week ago. But what they're trying to do is to get a ceasefire that stops the punishment that Israel is inflicting upon Hezbollah. This is a game that was played in 2006, where Hezbollah was playing the military angle, and Nabih Berri, who's the head of the Amal party, it's Hezbollah's rival, sometimes ally, but they're two sides of the Shiite coin in Lebanon. He was playing the political angle because he's trusted as an interlocutor by the West. So he's trying to get a ceasefire that stops the punishment on Hezbollah. And Hezbollah's officials have said, we put complete trust in Nabih Berri, right? There's rumors and speculation and gossip that this isn't the case, but everything we've seen outwardly is that Hezbollah is trusting Nabih Berri to get the ceasefire. And what that allows is, again, for Hezbollah to claim this victory, for Hezbollah to claim that, the challenge that Hassan Nasrallah's last words were that Israel will not be allowed to return its citizens to the north through military action, that came true. And it will stop the punishment that Israel is inflicting upon Hezbollah. It'll allow the organization to survive. It has not been anywhere near destroyed yet. And we'll return to a situation where Lebanon will say, well, and this is what they're trying to do, the Lebanese government, help us elect a president who then appoints a cabinet, and this could take a long time. And then we'll talk about a national defense strategy, including everyone. And this has to happen through dialogue, with everyone at the table. So This is how they intend to resolve the question of Hezbollah's arms, while having Hezbollah at the table. When they say everyone, they mean Hezbollah, because Hezbollah has a large support base, and Hezbollah is not going to approve its disarmament. So what we're going to be is going back to a situation like in 2006, where the Lebanese government made all these promises, and these promises just kind of disappeared into the Byzantine nature of Lebanese politics. They was just never acted upon, and international attention, as it does, was directed elsewhere. And here we are 18 years later fighting the same war that was fought in 2006. And I think this is the Lebanese intention again. Do this again, make all these promises, just get the ceasefire, and then just have this question just dissipate into the cackle, the noise of Lebanese politics, and nothing gets done.
David, I appreciate you joining me today, and as the situation develops, I hope you come back on.
Always a pleasure.